Staring blankly, both Karas's body and soul seemed to sag. He stopped sprinkling, and his arm and the vial dropped slowly and listlessly to his side. Hysteria, suggestion. She did read the book. He glanced at the tape recorder, and then lowered his head and shook it. Why bother? But now he noticed the silence, so airless, so deep, and he looked up at Regan, and instantly his eyebrows lowered and bunched together in perplexity. What's this, he thought. What's going on? The demonic personality had vanished, and in its place were other features which were similar and yet different, with the eyes now rolled upward into their sockets, so that only the whites balefully showed, lips moving. A feverish gibberish. Karas came around to the side of the bed and leaned over to listen. It's nothing, just nonsense syllables, he thought, and yet it's got cadence like a language. Could it possibly be, Karas wondered. Hoped. He felt a fluttering of wings in his chest. Swiftly gripped them, held them still. Come on, don't be an idiot, Damien. And yet. He checked the tape recorder's volume monitor, dialed up the amplification knob, and was listening intently with his ear held low above Regan's lips when abruptly the gibberish ceased and was replaced by heavy breathing, raspy and deep. Something new. No, someone new. Karas drew himself up and looked down at Regan in quiet wonder, whites of eyes, eyelids fluttering. Who are you? He asked. Now on my... Something answered him in pain and in a groaning whisper. Now on my... Now on my... The cracking, breathy voice seemed to come from afar, from some dark, cloistered space at the edge of the worlds, beyond time, beyond hope, beyond even the comfort of resignation and despair. Karas frowned. Is that your name? The lips moved, fevered syllables, slow, unintelligible, and then abruptly they ceased. Are you able to understand me? Asked Karas. Silence. Only breathing long and deep, the sound of sleep in a hospital respirator. Karas waited, hoped for more. Nothing came. Karas picked up the tape recorder, gave Regan a last searching look, and then left the room and went downstairs. He found Chris in the kitchen, sitting somber, lie over coffee at the table with Sharon. As they saw him approach, the two women looked up at him with a questioning, anxious expectancy. Better go check on Regan, Chris said quietly to Sharon. Yeah, sure. Sharon took a final sip of coffee, gave Karas a little smile of acknowledgement and left. Karas watched her, and when she was gone, he sat down at the table. Anxiously searching his eyes, Chris asked, So what's doing? About to answer, Karas hesitated as Carl entered quietly from the pantry and went over to the sink to scrub pots. It's okay, Chris said softly. Go ahead, Father Karas. And so what happened upstairs, what do you think? Karas clasped his hands together on the table. There were two personalities, he said, one that I hadn't ever seen before and another that I once might have gotten a glimpse of. Adult male. Sounds British. Is that anyone you know? Is that important? Once again, Karas noticed that certain sudden tension in Chris's face. Yes, I think so, he said. Yes, it's important. Chris looked down at the blue porcelain creamer on the table. Then, yeah, she said, I knew him. Knew? Chris looked up and said quietly, Burke Dennings. The director? Yes. The director who... Yes. Pondering her answer, Karas looked down at her hands. Chris's left index finger was slightly twitching. Are you sure you don't want coffee or anything, Father? Karas looked up. No, I'm okay, he said. I'm fine. And then, resting folded arms on the table, he leaned forward. And so was Regan acquainted with him? He asked. You mean Burke? Yes, Dennings. Well... A sudden sound, a loud clattering. Startled, Chris flinched, then saw that Carl had dropped a roasting pan to the floor, and as he stooped to retrieve it as he picked it up, he dropped it yet again. God almighty, Carl. Sorry, madam, sorry. Go on, get out of here, Carl. Take a break. Go see a movie or something. No, madam, maybe better if... Carl, I mean it, Chris snapped at him edgily. Get out. Just get out of this house for a while. We've all got to start getting out of here. Now go. Yes, you go, echoed Willie as she entered and snatched away the pan from Carl's grasp. She pushed him irritably toward the pantry. Carl briefly eyed Karas and Chris and then left. Sorry, Father, Chris murmured. She reached for a cigarette. He's had to take an awful lot lately. You were right, said Karas gently. He picked up a packet of matches. You should all make an effort to get out of the house. He lit her cigarette, fanned out the match and placed it in an ashtray as he added, You too. Yeah, I know. And so this Burke thing, whatever, I mean, what did it say? Chris was eyeing the priest intently. Karis shrugged. Just obscenities. That's all? The priest caught the faint pulse of fear in her tone. Pretty much, he responded. Then he lowered his voice. Incidentally, does Carl have a daughter? A daughter? No, not that I know of. Or if he does, he's never mentioned it. You're sure? Chris turned to Willie, who was scouring at the sink. Say you don't have a daughter, do you, Willie? Willie kept stolidly scouring as she answered, Yes, madam, but she died long before. Oh, I'm sorry, Willie. Thank you. Chris turned back to Karis. That's the first I ever heard of her, she whispered. Why'd you ask? How'd you know? Reagan mentioned it. Chris stared at him incredulously and whispered, What? She did. Has she ever shown signs before of having, well, ESP? ESP, father? Yes. Hesitant, Chris looked aside with a frown. I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, there have been lots of times when she seems to be thinking the same things that I'm thinking. But doesn't that happen with people who are close? Karis nodded and said, Yes, it does. Now this other personality, the third one that I mentioned, that's the one that showed up when she was hypnotized. Talks gibberish? Talks gibberish. Who is it? I don't know. It's not familiar at all? No, not at all. Have you sent for Reagan's medical records? They'll be here this afternoon. They're coming straight to you, father. That's the only way I could get them loose, and even at that I had to raise hell. Yes, I thought there might be trouble. There was. But they're coming. Good. Folding her arms across her chest, Chris leaned back in her chair and stared at Karis gravely. Okay, father, so where are we now? What's the bottom line? Well, your daughter... No, you know what I mean, Chris interrupted. I mean, what about getting permission for an exorcism? Karis cast his eyes down and gently shook his head. I'm just not very hopeful I could sell it to the bishop. What do you mean, not very hopeful? How come? Karis dipped into a pocket, extracted the holy water vial, and held it out to Chris. See this? He asked. What about it? I told Reagan it was holy water, Karis said softly, and when I started to sprinkle it on her, she reacted very violently. Oh, well, that's good, father. Isn't it? No. This really isn't holy water. It's just ordinary tap water. So what's the difference, father? Holy water's blessed. Oh, well, I'm happy for it, father. I really am. Chris shot back with a rising frustration and annoyance. And so maybe some demons are dumb. You really believe there's a demon inside her? I believe that there's something inside of her that's trying to kill her, and whether it knows piss from 7-Up doesn't seem to have very much to do with it. Don't you think so, Father Karis? I mean, sorry, but you asked my opinion. Chris irritably tamped out her cigarette in the ashtray. And so what are you telling me now? No exorcism? Look, I've only just begun to dig into this, Karis retorted, beginning to match Chris's heat. But the church has criteria that have to be met, and they have to be met for very good reasons, like not doing more harm than good, as well as trying to keep clear of the superstitious garbage that people keep pinning on us year after year. I give you levitating priests, for example, and statues of the Blessed Mother that supposedly cry blood on Good Fridays and feast days. Now I think I can live without contributing to that. Would you like a little Librium, Father? I'm sorry, but you asked my opinion. I think I pretty much got it. Karis reached for the cigarette pack. Me too, Chris said. Karis extended the pack. Chris took one, then Karis, who lit them both, and together they dragged and then exhaled smoke with audible sighs of relief at the return of calm and peace. I'm so sorry, said Karis, looking down at the table. Yeah, those non-filter cigarettes'll kill you. After that there was quiet as Chris looked off to the side and through a floor-to-ceiling window at Keybridge traffic. Then a sound of something softly and intermittently thumping. Chris turned and saw Karis staring down at the cigarette pack as he slowly kept turning it end over end. Abruptly he looked up and met Chris's moist and demanding stare. Okay, listen, he said. I'm going to give you the signs that the church might accept before authorizing a formal rite of exorcism. Yeah, good. I want to hear them. One is speaking in a language that the subject has never known before, never studied. That one I'm working on. We'll see. After that there's clairvoyance, although nowadays it might be ruled out as just telepathy or ESP. You believe in that stuff? Karis studied her, the grimace of disbelief, the frown. She was serious, he decided. It's undeniable these days, he told her, although, as I said, it isn't at all supernatural. Good grief, Charlie Brown. Oh, so you do have a skeptical side. What other symptoms? Well, the last that the church might accept is... quote, powers beyond her ability and age. That's a catch-all. It means anything inexplicably paranormal or occult. Oh, really? Well, then what about those poundings in the wall and the way she was flying up and down off the bed? By themselves, they mean nothing. Well, then what about those things on her skin? What things? I didn't tell you. Tell me what? Oh, well, it happened at Barringer Clinic, Chris explained. There were, well, she traced a finger on her chest. You know, like writing, just letters. They'd show up on her chest, then disappear. Just like that. Karis frowned. You said letters, not words? No, no words. Just an M once or twice. Then an L. And you saw this? Karis asked her. Well, no. But they told me. Who told you? Shit, the doctors at the clinic, Chris said irritably. Then, okay, sorry, she said. Look, you'll see it in the records. It's for real. But it too could be a natural phenomenon. Where? In Transylvania? Chris erupted again, incredulous. Karis shook his head. Look, I've come across cases of that in the journals, and the bishop could bring it up against us. There was one, I remember, where a prison psychiatrist reported that a patient of his, an inmate, could go into a self-induced state of trance and make the signs of the zodiac appear on his skin. He made a gesture at his chest. Made the skin raise up. Boy, miracles sure don't come easy with you, do they? What can I tell you? Look, there was once an experiment in which the subject was hypnotized, put into trance, and then surgical incisions were made in each arm. He was told his left arm was going to bleed, but that the right arm wouldn't. Well, the left arm bled and the right arm didn't. Whoa! Yes, whoa, the power of the mind controlled the blood flow. How? Who knows? But it happens. So in cases of stigmata, like the one with that prisoner I mentioned, or maybe even with Reagan, the unconscious mind is controlling the differential of blood flow to the skin, sending more to the parts that it wants raised up. And so then you have letters or images, maybe even words. It's mysterious, but hardly supernatural. You're a real tough case, Father Karis. Do you know that? I'm not the one who sets the rules. Well, you've sure got your heart into enforcing them.